Nearly 40 years after a high-profile sexual assault in the Philippines, questions and controversy remain. This is the Delia Dueñas Smith story.
Hi, Amy.
Hey, Meghan, how are you?
I'm good, and I heard you say Philippines.
Yes.
And why this, why it piqued my interest. I know it's part of our International Month series, but I feel like I saw an Instagram message.
Yes.
And perhaps this relates to that message. Is that right?
It does. Actually, this is from a listener all the way from the Philippines. So thank you to Anjanette for reaching out on Instagram to suggest this case. And not only did she suggest this case, she also helped me kind of figure out some of the legal implications that I just couldn't understand. So as always, thank you to our listeners and our supporters who continue to send in these incredible case suggestions.
I mean, that's really cool. It's sometimes challenging for us as domestic criminologists to understand the way the laws work in different systems. I mean, I know a ton about, obviously, UK and, a couple other probably European places, but I wouldn't know, the operations necessarily in the Philippines or, other countries. So it's really cool to have a little inside help, too, and to not just have to research it. Because also there's the formal and then there's the informal way that the law really works. So that's cool.
And that's exactly what I was interested in because my research explained it to me, but it still didn't make sense to me how it actually played out in the courtroom.
Got it.
Thank you again to Anjanette. Today's case is interesting because it highlights many different issues. Mm-hmm. We have issues of abuse and exploitation, but today's story also shows how individuals with political power and famous reputations can cause severe inequality in criminal justice systems and around the world. Because we know that happens here.
Yeah.
Right? But this month we're highlighting international cases.
So would this be like a famed case then, would you say? Or possibly famed outside of the U.S.?
So this case happened more than 4 decades ago. Oh. And it was a huge story, but it has recently been back in the news because of a film that's supposed to be coming out about Delia's story.
Okay.
And without giving too much away, it was not very well received by certain people.
All right, I'm going to stop asking questions just to let you tell the story.
Okay, so before we get to that, though, let's go ahead and meet Delia. Delia Dueñas Smith was born on July 17th, 1966 in Manila, Philippines. And that is where my stepmom is from, which I think you know. So a big shout out to Lori, who does not listen to this podcast, but just in case my dad was listening, he can tell her that we said hi.
We know your dad listens. He was a patron. So
he used to listen. I don't know. He hasn't mentioned anything. Remember, he's no longer a patron either.
That's right. So. Jeff, where are you? Okay.
Yeah, so we miss you. Okay. Delia's mother worked a lot to support her and her younger siblings as the father left the family when she was a young child. So Delia was the oldest. She had 4 younger siblings. Mm-hmm. In 1980, when Delia was just 14 years old, a talent scout named Tita Esther thought that Delia was a beautiful girl and she believed that she would have a successful film career. So this woman brought her to a talent manager by the name of Ray De La Cruz. And only a year later, again, she's just 15 here, Delia made her debut in the movie Brown Emmanuel, and she would go on to appear in several other films over the next few years. These weren't just any types of films, though. These films were part of a very specific genre called Bomba. Have you ever heard of this?
I feel like I have, oddly, but explain, if you don't mind.
Okay, so Bomba was what was known as, quote, bold films. In fact, the term Bomba literally translates to bold or scandalous.
Okay.
Now, Bomba emerged as a genre of film in the Philippines in the late 1960s. And these Bomba films were known as softcore porn. They featured nudity as well as sex scenes, and these sex scenes were often part of the plot. So the whole movie kind of centered around what was going on with, in the sexual relationship. Now, again, Delia was only 14, 15 years old when she began appearing in these films. And I wasn't able to find much commentary about the use of children in these types of films, but I think it's clear that this is problematic.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Delia was quite beautiful, though, and she was a young rising star, and she became one of the Philippines' soft drink beauties. And she was given the stage name Pepsi Paloma.
Oh.
So basically, these were four beautiful young girls who were brought together by a talent agency, and they were given stage names. They all had names that had like a soda reference to them.
Okay.
It's kind of like, it reminds me of the creation of boy bands or even the Spice Girls. When, sometimes they were friends already, but sometimes, talent agents will just kind of bring them together if they think they'll, get along well.
Okay.
To understand some of what happens next, we need to take a look at where the Philippines was politically at this time. The country had lived under martial law on and off since the late 1800s. So basically, that's when part or all of the country is under military control.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a 14-year period that the country was under this martial law, and there was severe human rights violation. And during this time, all aspects of mass media, including film, were subjected to political censorship.
Right.
So, as you could imagine, when it was lifted in 1981, it marked a significant turning point in the nation's history, particularly in the entertainment industry.
Oh, yeah.
So, Delia was really becoming famous at the forefront of this new world.
Mm-hmm.
But though her star seemed to be on the rise, Delia's life would take a dark turn on the night of July 21st, 1982. On this particular evening, Delia was attending an industry party with her friend and fellow actress, Guada Garin. While Delia was only 16 years old at this time, although I want to say some reports say that she was still 15, so she was on the cusp between 15 and 16.
Mm-hmm.
So although she was young, this was very standard for her as an actress to be going to these types of parties.
I mean, I just want to point out that it was here in the U.S. as well. I distinctly remember young actresses like Drew Barrymore and others going to parties in their early teens and being subjected to scenes they really should not have been as such young children. But I just wanted to make that comparison.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, if you recall, Brooke Shields was featured nude, I believe, from the waist up at a very young age, 12 or 13 years old. So, it wasn't necessarily, it was happening here as well.
Mm-hmm. And at this particular party, Delia and Guada chatted with other people in the entertainment industry. And at one point, they got into a conversation with three very famous Filipino actors/comedians. These men were Vic Soto, Joey De Leon, and Ricardo Reyes. All of these men were between 10 and 20 years older than the girls. Two of these three were the hosts of a show called Eat Beluga. It was a popular noontime show that debuted on national TV in the Philippines in 1979. Now, Vic, Joey, and Vic's older brother, Tito, who wasn't at the party, but the three of them were considered a cultural phenomenon at the time. So they were very famous. The exchange between the young girls and these men quickly turned into an assault when the men lifted Delia's shirt and began kissing her against her will. Now, at one point, one of the men held her hands down while the other man kissed her, and then they would swap. Details are unclear because accounts vary, but what is known is that these women were definitely assaulted at this party.
Was this in a room full of people, or did this happen behind closed doors?
I couldn't get an exact feeling on that because I was curious as well.
Okay.
From what I got just from the information, it seemed to me that it was maybe a party, but they were maybe in a corner or off to the side. Everyone's kind of doing their own thing, so maybe nobody noticed.
Okay.
But it would get worse because Delia would claim that Vic, Joey, and Ricardo drugged her and Guada before bringing them to a hotel room nearby and sexually assaulting them. Some reports say that the women agreed to go with the men, but I do find this unlikely. Although, it's also possible they were coerced. Remember, they were children, and these men were much older and powerful. So regardless, there's an abuse going on here. So I would never say that these women willingly, or that these girls willingly went with the men.
I was going to say, they're children. And yeah, exactly.
According to Delia, Joey De Leon first molested her and Guada, after which 3 men gang raped her while Guada was forced to watch. The girls were able to escape, and Delia told her mom about the assault, and they went to the authorities. On August 18th of 1982, Delia officially filed charges of rape against the 3 television personalities. And these allegations were severe, because if these men were convicted of these crimes, they faced execution by the electric chair.
Oh, okay.
In fact, a few years prior, a famous actress by the name of Maggie de la Riva, she was abducted and raped by 4 men. And this case became one of the most publicized cases in the country's history. These 4 men had come from very influential families, and 3 of 4 of them were put to death by the electric chair. And not only that, these executions were broadcast on public radio. So this caused mass hysteria and sensationalism. So, this is a time in the country where tensions are pretty high.
Okay. I have questions, but I'm definitely going to reserve them and see if you get there.
Now, I do want to mention that the death penalty was abolished in the Philippines in 1986, but then it was restored with lethal injection replacing electrocution. But then it was suspended in 2006, and that's where it remains today.
Okay.
Just because we are talking about a different country, so
Sure.
I wanted to clear that up.
Yeah.
Another really interesting tidbit about the legal system in the Philippines, and this is where one of our listeners really helped me out. Now, if you're the victim of a crime in the Philippines, you need to hire your own attorney.
If you're the victim, you need to hire your own attorney. You have
Yes.
to. Okay.
Now, I would like to read what Anjanette sent because she has a friend who's a lawyer. And so she got me, the real information because from what I found online, it's similar to our public defense system in that there are public prosecutors and they can be appointed to you.
Okay.
However, private prosecutors are the ones who get the job done more, so to speak. The same way in our country, if you have money and you get a private defense attorney, then, your case tends to work a little more in your favor. It seems like that's what happens with victims. So it kind of works the opposite way. So she says the public prosecutor handles the prosecution, but the complainant can hire a private attorney to act as a private prosecutor. And this person works under the supervision of the public prosecutor. Now, this doesn't necessarily speed up if you have a private lawyer, so it doesn't speed up the process. However, it's better because that person can focus on your case and they're working as an advocate for you. I get the feeling that the public prosecutors are overworked and underpaid the way that our public defense attorneys
Right.
are.
Okay, so it's just the flip side. Very interesting.
Yes. They also, these private attorneys, if you hire a private prosecutor, they also help look after the victim's family and help keep the media and the public focused on the case. So they're kind of like they play like a PR role as well.
Sounds like they also play like victim's advocate,
Yes.
because they are a lawyer, but they're also like, I bet they're also navigating victims' rights throughout the entire time. It's like a triple role.
So as you could imagine, everyone involved was famous. The men were very famous and influential. And Pepsi, actually, I call her Delia. Pepsi was her stage name.
Mm-hmm.
All of the media reports call her Pepsi, but for some reason, I just felt better calling her by her birth name.
Yeah, because that's her name.
That is her name, yes. But she was pretty famous in her own right. Now, these accusations were all over the media. But as I don't think you'll be surprised to learn, the men gave several interviews denying the rape. They claimed that it was a gimmick concocted by Delia's manager as a way to gain publicity.
Ugh.
And not only did they deny it, they went ahead and filed libel charges against both of the girls.
This is infuriating. Okay, so the other girl, the other victim in this case also filed charges against them, which is why they're filing libel against both. So the two girls were sticking together on this.
I do believe so, although everything you read really does only focus on Delia. I'm not sure. This other woman, I believe, or this other girl, again, I keep saying woman, but they were children.
Right.
This other girl was an actress as well, but I get the feeling that maybe she was not as popular, or maybe she tried to stay out of the limelight a little bit.
Okay.
But in addition to the libel charges, Vic's brother, remember Tito Soto, I mentioned him, he was also very famous.
Yeah.
He got involved. And according to Delia, he met with her to have her sign what's known as an affidavit of desistance. Basically, he was trying to get her to drop charges against his brother.
Yeah.
And during this meeting, Delia claimed that he placed the gun on the table and he intimidated her into signing. And she did sign. Again, she is a child.
And a gun? I mean, you don't have to be a child to be afraid of a gun. This is whoa.
Yeah. There are some newspaper reports that did state that it was Delia's mother who signed the document on her behalf. Mm-hmm. But whoever signed it, the men were basically off the hook, and Delia did not pursue any further legal action.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. And as you could imagine, this weighed very heavily on her. She's a young girl who's trying to navigate being in the spotlight, and now she's the victim of this, sexual assault. No one believes her, and she needs to kind of just try to figure out how to move forward.
Oh my God, please tell me there's more to this story.
There is more to the story.
Does it get better?
No, it does not.
Oh, all
So
right.
3 months after the alleged rape, and I have to say alleged because they were not they were not prosecuted, but
We could
I
say
think it's
reported.
yeah. So anyway, these men, they came forward publicly to admit that they did something wrong, and they issued an apology.
Ugh.
Now, they did not say that there was a sexual assault, but they made a vague statement that was broadcasted on live TV and also published in some very famous media outlets. And this is what they said, quote, "We hope that you will not allow the error we have committed against you to stand as a stumbling block to the future that we all look forward to. We therefore ask you to find it in your heart to pardon us for the wrong which we have done against you." So first of all, they called it an error.
Yeah, ridiculous.
Yeah.
Is this a public plea to the girls or is this to the people?
I'm not sure because it did sound like to the girls, but
It sounds like a PR move. Like they were taking probably some heat, even though they were off the hook legally. They were trying to figure out a way maybe to rehab their image a little bit. I mean, I don't know.
yeah, and then things would take an even more tragic turn. When 3 years later, on May 31st of 1985, now 19-year-old Delia was found dead in her apartment.
Oh.
And there aren't many details about how she was found, other than her boyfriend had discovered her and it had appeared that she had hung herself.
Ugh.
The death was officially ruled a suicide very quickly. And after this ruling, many speculated that there was perhaps more to the story, but there was never any proof that there was any foul play. But there was a lot of talk about how Delia had been driven to do this because of the psychological toll that she had suffered at the hands of her rapist.
Yeah.
And also the way the entertainment industry had exploited her.
Yeah. The justice system totally ignored her.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's hard enough to cope with a sexual assault, but to have no one acknowledge what you've been through, to have no sense of any type of justice, I really can't imagine how to move past that. I really can't.
And there were some reports that she was struggling with substance abuse and she did have mental health issues. I believe there was some sort of strained relationship going on with her mother. I also read that she had adopted her brother's child. Like there was just a lot going on. Things seemed to be really complicated for Delia at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And she had to grow up very quickly, given what she was thrown into at such a young age.
Right.
Then there was even more controversy because in 1988, only a few years after Delia's suspected suicide, Tito Soto, the man who allegedly intimidated Delia to drop the allegations, well, he became mayor of Quezon City.
Oh.
So he's a big political figure now.
Powerful.
Yeah, so, this led many people questioning, did Delia really die by suicide due to the psychological toll, or was something deeper going on? There was also more suspicion raised when one of her alleged rapists sought to leverage the remnants of martial law to silence media coverage surrounding the incident. So this attempt to suppress information reflected a broader culture of fear and intimidation that persisted even long after martial law was officially lifted.
Oh, so he's trying to resurrect part of... Oh, I see. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because these men are powerful and they don't want any, press out there saying that they, assaulted this woman.
Or that in any way this assault led to her ultimate possible suicide.
Which, of course, there's no way for us ever to draw a causal link between those two.
Yeah.
Again, I want to make it very clear that there is no evidence that suggests foul play in Delia's death, but there is a lot of speculation on the internet, so I wanted to share the public discourse that was surrounding what's going on.
Okay.
So as I mentioned earlier, Delia's name, or at least her stage name, Pepsi Paloma, is back in popular culture as of recently. And that's because just last year, in 2024, filmmaker Daryl Yap announced a forthcoming movie entitled The Rape of Pepsi Paloma, a drama that aims to depict the events surrounding the 1982 scandal.
Sounds like we can guess what side he's going to be portraying as the truth as well, or at least it sounds that way.
Yeah, but this has generated debate on a lot of different fronts. Now, some people express concern about the portrayal of sensitive historical events, but I think what's even more interesting is that it has prompted discussions about media representation, historical accountability, and the ethical considerations of dramatizing real life events.
Right.
Because again, this is not a documentary. It's a dramatized film.
Right.
Remember I said the film was called The Rape of Pepsi Paloma?
Yeah.
Well, guess what? It is now titled Pepsi Paloma for the Philippine release. They dropped the word rape for the release in their country, but for the international version, it's still called The Rape of Pepsi Paloma.
Okay. When is this film slated to be released, or is it out yet? Like, where are we at with it? And had there been critical reviews? Had anyone in the government, I imagine they tried to block this film.
The film is to be released this month, February 2025.
Oh.
So by the time this episode is released, it is quite possible. But I do think there might be some delays because the film's producers aired a 27-second teaser for the film's debut. And just from that 27 seconds, the director is facing millions in damages, 19 counts of libel, and a gag order.
I mean, I had a feeling that's what was coming.
Do you want to take a guess on who is filing these charges and these orders?
Tito.
Yes, none other than Tito and Vic Soto. Because you see, as much as Delia's life was cut short, her alleged rapist and intimidator went on to have incredibly successful lives.
Yeah.
So in addition to being the vice mayor of Quezon City in 1988, Tito Soto also served as senator of the Republic of the Philippines from 1992 to 2016 and Senate president from 2016 to 2022.
Wow, just rose through the ranks. What about his brother?
Well, Vic remains an actor, and he has been tagged as the Philippine box office king.
You really?
So he is a pretty popular guy, yeah. Now, recall Joey De Leon was also part of this group.
Yes.
He also remains an actor and continues to host that show that I mentioned earlier. And then that other man, Ricardo Reyes, he continued a successful career until his death in 2015. As if their successes wasn't enough, in 2018, Tito requested that the Philippine Inquirer remove all published articles online that mention the Pepsi Paloma case because he says they were damaging his reputation as a senator.
And did they remove them? I mean, do we know?
No, it seems like it's an ongoing fight, but I think perhaps the most problematic in reference to the movie that's coming out, Tito Soto is attempting to stage a comeback in the Senate in the upcoming 2025 midterm elections. So I'm pretty sure a movie depicting his brother as a rapist and him as an intimidator would not be very good for his political reputation.
No, I imagine it wouldn't be.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean that just because he's filed suit and potential gag orders doesn't mean that it'll actually stop the film.
It doesn't.
It's a different time now too. I mean, it's possible. It's possible that this film passes through. It's published. And there's a very possible different attitude towards the men involved here. And I do realize that we're talking about alleged events. But I also would point out that these two young girls probably had nothing to gain and everything to lose by alleging these three very powerful men in their industry sexually assaulted them. So I just want to kind of put that in the proper context.
Yes, and I'll have you know that the courts sided with the Soto brothers.
What?
So Tito went to the courts to have press for the new Pepsi Paloma video removed, and the courts, in a 20-page decision, ordered that filmmaker Daryl Yap take down the trailer for the film that was released on New Year's Day. Remember that 27-second trailer?
Yeah, okay, so the trailer came down.
Okay, so listen to this. Part of the petition read, quote, Respondent Daryl Ray Yap and any person or entity acting on his behalf, including the production team of Vin Sentiments, are ordered to delete, take down, and remove the teaser video from online platforms, social media, or any other medium for having misused the collected data and information by presenting a conversation between two deceased individuals, which cannot be verified as having actually occurred. So, remember I said one of the men had died in 2015?
Yeah.
And Delia had also died. So the court was hinging on the fact that this depiction between two people that are no longer here to, I guess, say their side of the story. But as you mentioned, the trailer was ordered to be removed, but the court allowed the production and the eventual release of the film.
Okay. Are there ramifications, I wonder, after? After it's released, will there be another suit? I wonder if public opinion will change. And also, I'm curious, is there anyone from Delia's family or friends or anyone that's involved that spoke about the film or anything like that now?
Not publicly, but as of the airing of this episode, just yesterday, I discovered that the Movie and Television Review and Classification Board requested the company to provide a certificate of clearance of no pending criminal, civil, or administrative case.
What does
So
that mean?
basically, from what I understand, is before the board can proceed with a review of the film, and it seems as if films can't be released without approval by this board, they need to make sure that there's none of these pending charges. But then I found another article, and unfortunately, they both seem to be credible sources, but since they are international media, I could be mistaken. But I found an article pretty much at the same time that said just the opposite. Quote, contrary to a false claim, the Movie and Television Review and Classification Board hereby serves notice that the Pepsi Paloma movie is not under review due to incomplete requirements. So it seems like nobody really knows what's going on at the moment with the film. I definitely plan on following it, though, and watching the movie when it's released. I'm curious how dramatized it is. I have a feeling it will be very much so.
So it's interesting to me because we don't know about the laws, and I don't know the laws here as well, but I know that there are plenty of films that are dramatized that are, quote, based on a true story or depict true events. And I don't know what the requirements are for how you have to verify certain information and what you can actually publish and how they would vary from the Philippines or how they would vary from international distributors. I really don't have any idea about that kind of like entertainment law, but I'd be very interested to see, A, if the movie is available for distribution, and B, if I'd really be curious to see if it has any impact on public opinion about what happened or about these famous men.
Yeah, it's interesting timing given that this man is up for, his political reappointment.
That's what I mean. I'm curious to see, will it impact his political career? Will it, sink his legacy? Will it, what will be the outcome, if any, if it is in fact distributed?
And I tried to understand the law because I thought that was an important part of this case, but I really had trouble finding that information. I don't know if there's like different regulations for different parts of the Philippines. It was very hard for me to find. So maybe our listener who helped me with the legal aspect can write in and help shed some light on that. In all the coverage of this case, there seemed to be a focus on potential false allegations and the power of the accused men to spin the narrative.
Yeah.
But I think we need to shed light on the fact that Delia was a child.
Yep.
Again, she was just 16 at the time of the events, and when she started appearing in Bomba films, she was just 14, possibly early 15. So I wanted to look into the exploitation of children in the film industry.
Right.
But again, I kept hitting walls. I couldn't find any information on statistics or protections given to children in these situations.
Really?
So I was looking at the Philippine entertainment industry, and then I said, you know what, let me look at the United States to get a reference point. And I even had trouble really nailing it down, what the rules are. SAG had a lot of information, the Screen Actor Guild, about what child actors can and cannot do.
Yes.
But I didn't find a lot of information about, nudity and, scenes, sex scenes, stuff like that.
I know they are pretty clear about things they can't do, and even like hours on set. I feel like in the U.S., the age of children being allowed to perform sexually or with adults, I might say, in a film is 18. And I'm not positive about that. I thought that was the legality of it now. Like you have to be 18 to participate with adults in sex scenes. I don't know how that compares with the Philippines, though, as well.
So in the Philippines, it's definitely younger. I know the age of consent is 16, but just a couple of years ago, it was 12.
Wow.
So I think that also is, that does help us look at this through a different lens.
Okay.
Because
yeah.
we're looking at it through our cultural lens.
Of course.
But in the Philippines, if you're watching a Bomba film and in your culture, the age of consent is 12, it's different probably. Because if you see a 14 or 15-year-old on screen, I think it must feel different. when the legality is, they're legally able to be doing that, I guess.
And yeah, I understand what you mean too. There is a cultural lens through which we look because we're accustomed to the ways in which we look at children. And many different cultures treat children differently as well,
Yeah.
age-wise, role-wise. So, I mean, I don't like it, hearing age of consent at 12, but I do understand that my view is definitely biased by where I am and where I grew up.
Yeah. And, going back to Delia, some people do wonder if she was actually murdered, but there's so little information surrounding her death and the circumstances. But those close to her do say that she was never the same after the alleged assault, and that they found many journals after she died, and journals suggested that she was struggling quite a bit.
I would not be surprised one bit to learn that she did not rebound from being gang raped and then disregarded as a victim and a person.
Yeah.
So I would not be surprised at all if that was a major contributor to her suicide, if that's in fact what happened.
Even though this case is over 40 years old, it just shows how much things have stayed the same when it comes to reporting and getting justice for sexual assault.
True. Yeah.
In our country, many women came out during the Me Too movement and shared lots of similar experiences, showing that as much as we have come far, maybe in some ways, it is still so difficult to get justice for women like Delia.
Yeah, absolutely. When there's a power dynamic, of course, as well, the power dynamic seriously alters the game. So does gender, so does age.
Yeah.
It all shifts the power balance into the hands of a few people.
Yep. And since today's story contained discussions of sexual assault and suicide, I would just like to share some resources that will also be in our show notes.
Okay.
If you or someone you know is affected by sexual assault, you can contact the National Sexual Assault Hotline at 1-800-656-4673 or visit RAINN.org. That's RAINN.org for online support. And if you need emotional support, you can dial 988 for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. The Lifeline provides 24/7 free and confidential support. You can also go to their website, 988lifeline.org. Before we go today, we have a question from one of our patrons. So supporter Tara says, thinking about 100 years ago in 1925 in terms of crimes and the justice system, evidence collection, scientific advancements, DNA testing, identification of junk science, etc., versus now in 2025, and seeing how far we've come in 100 years, with things like touch DNA and the whole world having access to the internet 24/7. What are some of the things that you hope or predict might be happening by the year 2125?
Whoa, that is great.
Isn't that a cool question?
Such a cool question.
Yes.
All right, go ahead, Amy. I'll let you take it first.
Well, first of all, hopefully the planet will still be here and society will still be functioning. So assuming that happens, I would like to think that the number of people wrongfully arrested, wrongfully convicted will go down a lot, given that we see such a jump in, change in procedures and scientific advancements, that's only going to continue. I'd like to think that we will see a much less of a focus on incarceration and more of a focus on rehabilitation. Maybe our numbers, what are we at? 2.2 million people incarcerated right now. Maybe we'll see a drop in that. Maybe prisons will look very different. I'd like to think, this might be cautiously optimistic, but I would love to think that our prisons might look more like maybe the prisons we see in Norway and Sweden.
That's interesting. That would have been one of my suggestions as well, or one of the things that I would hope to see with all the advancements. Pretty much what you said. I would hope with all the advancements that we could drastically reduce wrongful convictions, because if we've come this far and we have this much evidence and we can use surveillance and DNA, even though we know it's not always available for all cases, but with the widespread availability of it, I would think it would make the justice administration a little bit easier in terms of reducing wrongful convictions. And I would hope that we would have a serious advance in prisons and the prison administration. I hope our prisons are radically, radically different. And frankly, I hope we see less prisons, just a lot less. Let's build them differently or not rebuild them at all because we want to use alternatives and we want to drastically reduce the population? That is such a great question. It's interesting to also think, like, what advances could there be in science?
Yeah,
It's
we don't know.
beyond
We don't
me.
know.
Yeah, it's beyond me to speculate what could be better than DNA. Oh, maybe one of the things that I would hope to see, we have figured out DNA so well, but one of the substantial problems is our DNA, our backlog in testing DNA. So I would think if we could remedy one area is reducing that backlog or getting rid of it.
Yes, that's a great point.
Great question.
Yes. And also along the lines of like services being provided, maybe better treatment of victims, more support for victims, hopefully there'll be a focus there as well.
I want to also point out that we are like in this era of AI, the rise of AI, right? In many different ways, there are different crimes that have emerged, like cyber crimes and things, So I think we're going to see an evolution of crime, newer crimes. However, I think we could also hope that AI can help us solve crimes. So I think it's going to both create a different breed of crime, but then also I think it's going to help and be instrumental in solving crimes. To what degree, I wouldn't be able to say. It's not like a Minority Report situation, I don't think, but I think we are going to see like the advances in AI are going to kind of blow our mind in at least in the next 20 years or so.
I agree. Thank you again, Tara, for that question. That was a really interesting one and probably one that I'm going to be continuing to think about as the day goes on.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening, and we hope to catch you on the next episode of Women in Crime.
Women in Crime is written and hosted by Meghan Sachs and Amy Shlosberg. Our producer is James Varga. Script editing is by Abagail Belcastro. Audio editing is by Siler Burr and Jose Alfonso. And music is by Desert Media. If you enjoy the show, please remember to follow and leave a review. You can also support the show through Patreon, where you can get access to additional ad-free content such as exclusive full-length episodes, lectures, a book club, and virtual happy hours with Meghan and Amy. For more information, visit patreon.com/womenandcrime.
Sources for today's episode include Brigada News Philippines, the Manila Bulletin, Rolling Stone Philippines, the Daily Tribune, the Philippine Sentinel, and entertainment.inquirer.net.